Director of the ACLU, Anthony Romero.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. To those of you here in the auditorium today in Miami, I want to thank you for making the time on this Saturday afternoon to join us for this resistance training. To the folks who are watching via their web and their house parties, we have more than 200,000 card-carrying members who took themselves to more than 2,000 house parties in each and every single state of the union to attend this training. So let's give them a round of applause. Now, I'm not going to gild the lily. These last 4 months have been remarkably challenging for the ACLU, right? We woke up the morning after the election, like many of you, and we took a deep breath and we thought about the challenges we would have to confront, that our organization was created for moments like this. That, in fact, thank you. For our 97 years, our task has been to speak truth to power and to stand up for the values that make this country great in a way that most people don't fully recognize, especially in the Oval Office. That what makes us great in America is the freedom of speech, freedom of dissent, the right of due process, equal protection of the law, that we treat people not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, even if they are Muslims or undocumented immigrants or women who wish to get abortions or LGBT students, that all of us have these rights. And our organization was created to ensure that each and every single person live with the right to dignity. Now, I'm here to tell you what we're going to do. I'm here to tell you what you're going to do. And I'm here to tell you what we're up against. What we're going to do at the ACLU, we are scaling up. We have more than 300 litigators all across this country. We will add another 100 staff nationwide, about 100 litigators nationwide, to really up our game on the many issues that we know we will have to fight this administration. The issues we prioritize are immigrants, reproductive rights, the First Amendment and freedom of religion, civil rights, and LGBT rights. We will bring all the lawsuits necessary to ensure and defend those rights. Just as we did with the Scopes trial, just as we did with Korematsu, just as we did with Miranda and Gideon and Griswold and Obergefell, we will bring those cases against all odds, no matter what. Second thing, what are you going to do? Now, what's remarkable is that the events after the election, that we've had people turn out, organically come to us. It didn't take a lot of work to fill this auditorium. It wasn't even that hard to get 200,000 people going to 2,000 house parties. People are motivated. They're paying attention. They're angry. They want to be deployed. They don't just want to write you a check or write you a petition or send an email. They want to be engaged. You want to be protagonists with us. So we hear you. We open the doors to the church. And now come in. Let's do this together. We need you to be protagonists in this struggle. We'll do the work in the courts. You do the work in the streets. And failure is not an option. Because if we can put the pressure on elected officials through town halls, through lobbying, through direct actions, for protests in support of the values we believe in, like we believe in Planned Parenthood, let's protest in front of their clinics of support. Let's protest on behalf of undocumented immigrants and hold up signs saying, "Welcome to America, you new citizen." Let's show the signs of support for Muslim centers. So people powers our effort to harness that great energy, and that our membership went from 400,000 members to more than 1.2 million members. So we hear you, we heed you, we need you, and we will deploy you. Final thing, what we're up against. Now, even though I feel very good about the organization that I represent, and it's a privilege to do the work I do, and even though I'm incredibly hardened by the 1.2 million people who now are part of the ACLU family to make a difference in this world, I also want us to be clear-eyed about what we're up against. We have 300 lawyers. The Justice Department has 11,000 lawyers working for Jeff Sessions. When you count the number of lawyers working for the whole US government, you have 19,000 lawyers working for President Trump. And he's clear about his ideological agenda. Just today, you heard him fire a bunch of US attorneys in the Justice Department because he didn't like the party they came from. This is a man that will expect to double down on his ideological agenda. And even though we will do everything we can, we are still the David to the government's Goliath. And some of the actions you'll take may not succeed. And some of the elected officials we'll ask you to talk to may not hear you or heed you. But we must never despair. Even when we lose, we must take courage in the fact that this is worth fighting for, that there is dignity in entering this battle, that we will not cede this ground to ideologues or to his supporters who don't believe or support in the best of American values. We must never dismay from the challenges we confront, even in our darkest moments, because democracy must never be a spectator sport. Our rights, the freedom of speech, the freedom of protest, the freedom to petition one's government, those are not just rights. In the Trump era, those are obligations. And so, I ask you to stick with us, to make sure that you're there, that you're fired up, that this will be a long 4 years, but with you, we and you will get through this together. And we and you will make sure that our best values are never betrayed. Messy, disruptive, loud, that's what democracy looks like. So let's go show them, shall we? Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome National Political Director of the ACLU, Faz Shakir.
This is a tremendous crowd, tremendous crowd. Miami, we've got a lot of people watching tonight. So I think one of the things we need to let them know is how many people are here. So on the count of three, how about we yell people power on the count of three? You ready? 1, 2, 3. Tremendous, tremendous. As Anthony Romero just said, Donald Trump is moving at an incredible pace. And in so doing, he's violating our Constitution, our morals, and our values. And I just want to talk about one of those areas very briefly, and that's in the area of immigration. You look at what Trump's mass deportation force is doing right now, it is ruining the lives of our friends and neighbors. It is making their lives a living hell. Just in the last few weeks alone, there was a dreamer in Mississippi who was speaking at a press conference, and she was picked up and detained. There was, thankfully she's now out because of community engagement. There was a domestic violence survivor who was seeking refuge in a court of law in Texas and was picked up and detained. There was a father of a 13-year-old daughter who was picked up and detained while her daughter was weeping uncontrollably, a scene that was captured on video. It was so painful to watch. This is not the America we want to live in. An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. We cannot be bullied out of our humanity. So what are we going to do about it? How do we fight back? I've got some ideas about that. So we at the ACLU believe that one of the strongest sources of our political power are towns and cities across the United States. Towns and cities have constitutional sovereignty, they have constitutional rights of their own, and we believe cities should be cities of resistance to Donald Trump. So we are leading a campaign to call for freedom cities across the United States, and here's how it will work. So the first thing we need to do is build a set of ideas that we have laid out, 9 draft ordinances to make our city welcoming to all immigrants. So our law enforcement officials have worked with us at the ACLU to come up with 9 draft ordinances that would make our cities welcoming to all immigrants. And these 9 draft ordinances, law enforcement officials have said, are smart police powers. This is smart policing because it means that when we engage in this kind of behavior, we aren't turning our community against one another. It means we aren't tearing apart the community at the seams. It means we're using our law enforcement resources to focus on real priorities. And so these 9 ordinances that our experts have come together on, I think will form the basis of a conversation that we need to have. And so here's what we're asking. The first step is that in towns and communities across the United States, let's set up a meeting with our law enforcement officials. Let's ask our police commissioners, our sheriffs, our local precinct commanders, if they will meet with us and discuss whether our cities can become freedom cities and whether we can resist Donald Trump's radical immigration plan together, right? If we can have this conversation with our law enforcement community, I think we will have made tremendous success in fighting back on Donald Trump's agenda. By the way, do not worry that you're bothering or burdening our law enforcement community with such a request. They work for us. They report to us. They serve us. They have staff who are there to respond to requests from the community. So don't feel like you're doing anything too difficult here. They should meet with us. And if they give you a date, time, and location for such a meeting, go to peoplepower.org, put it on the map so that others in the community are aware of it and can attend that meeting. This is how we start. This is how we build something, right? So I know that this is going to be a little bit hard, a little bit difficult. It's going to take a little time. It's going to be a little complex. But I trust that if we do this together, we will have meaningful impact. This could really change the way Donald Trump goes about his business, right? We can really change and make our country a better country if we go about this way. So go to peoplepower.org, read our action plan, a step-by-step action plan, and let's work to make our cities freedom cities. 2 more things. 2 quick things and I'm done here. 1, we are working together on freedom cities, but we want to hear from you on what ideas and actions you have that you want to do in your cities and communities. What are the things that you're posting to Facebook about and trying to motivate your friends and allies around? Go to peoplepower.org, submit an event, let us know what you're doing in your community so that you can talk to like-minded friends, and we can help you build even more support for what you're trying to do. So I hope you don't come away from this saying, well, I want to do something else, but they didn't let me. Go to peoplepower.org, submit your event that way, all right? And as you're going about it, let me humbly suggest one thought as you're thinking about grassroots actions. You know, as Donald Trump is going about his hate agenda, we need to live our love. We need to live our values. And so if think about it this way, whatever he's doing, let's have an equal and opposite reaction in the opposite direction. So here's what I'm thinking about that. So if he wants to beat up on Muslims, how about we go to a mosque on a Friday afternoon and stand outside with positive signs in support of our Muslim brothers and sisters? If he wants to go after immigrants, How about we go to a naturalization ceremony and shake hands with newly minted citizens and welcome them to the United States? If he wants to beat up on refugees, how about we go find a recently resettled refugee in our community and hold a potluck dinner for them? If he wants to beat up on Planned Parenthood, we're going to go send letters and thanking our Planned Parenthood staff and maybe a contribution as well, right? This is how you should be thinking about it. We're living our values. For everything he does, an equal and opposite reaction. Last thing, I believe in grassroots organizing. I'm going to give you my email address because I want to hear from you. This is actually my email address. It's fshakir@aclu.org. FSHAKIR@aclu.org. I want to hear from you. And before I go, people power on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome ACLU attorney Lee Rowland.
Hi guys, thank you for being here. I particularly appreciate it because I am a free speech attorney, so we're going to talk about resistance. All right. So I work to protect free speech at the National ACLU, and I'm what you'd call a true believer in the First Amendment. It is foundational, and what that means is without the right to speak, without the right to organize and protest, we wouldn't be able to call out injustice and organize for a better world, which is what we're all here for. So we are a full-service constitutional organization. And what we're going to talk about today are tools for constitutional resistance. And by that I mean I'm going to give you a top-line view of the speech and protest that's protected by the First Amendment. Now, what we're not talking about today is intentionally breaking the law or engaging in civil disobedience. Those may be powerful acts of resistance, but if you choose them, I want to make sure that's a considered choice and that you know the Constitution may not protect you from the consequences of that kind of action. But what we do at the ACLU is the Constitution. That's kind of our brand. So we're going to talk about the First Amendment and what it protects. The first thing to note is that we fight, as you've heard from Faz and Anthony, for equality and justice for all. And when we fight for free speech, we also fight for the rights of all speakers. And that's true whether you're left or right, or socialist or libertarian, whether you're hateful or nonsensical, we defend it all. And that means that there are times when we may protect the speech of somebody that we fundamentally disagree with, because their rights, their beliefs are protected by the Constitution too. And the reason that's so important is because our First Amendment rights are truly indivisible. I'll give you an example. If you go online right now, you're going to pretty easily find evidence that people with power, people with real political power, believe that Black Lives Matter is a hate group or engages in hate speech. I think that's nuts. We obviously disagree, but it shows the real problems we have when we give the government the power to determine who has the right to speak and who doesn't. So as you join us on this journey, don't be surprised if you see me or the ACLU sticking up for somebody controversial, somebody whose views you may find abhorrent. We're not doing it because we agree with them. To the contrary, we're doing it because we protect all speech to make sure that none of us is silenced. Okay, so let's talk about the First Amendment a little bit. The First Amendment, it turns out, has everything to do with geography. Where you stand determines in large part how much your speech or your protest is protected. Here we have an old school quote from the Supreme Court, and it kind of is laying out the big three, what we call streets, sidewalks, and parks. So you might know on a gut level, you don't really have a right to go in and hold a protest on somebody else's private property. But these places, what we call public forum spaces, it's almost impossible for the government to silence you consistent with the Constitution. So let's start with streets. Here we've got some suffragettes wishing Ma could vote. And as you can see, protesting in the street is a grand old American tradition. And you have the right to protest in the street, despite some of the rhetoric you may hear from state legislators across the country. But you don't have a right to intentionally go out and block traffic or obstruct people. So, as a general matter, you can be told to stay towards the edge of the street in the breakdown lane or sometimes up on the sidewalk. Now, if you do get a permit, it gives you a bunch more rights. You can work with law enforcement to get things like a parade route that can actually shut down streets. You can use amplified sound, and you can produce incredible images like this. Imagine if the suffragettes could see. 104 years later, here we have a new generation of people making their voices known in the streets, and it turns out we do vote now, and we march. And the Women's March was the single largest day of protest in American history. Yeah. Damn right. I call that a good start. Let's give that day a run for its money. And you might not be surprised that sidewalks are a great place to protest, and you might not be surprised either to know that the sidewalks outside of Trump Tower have become a very popular place to make one's voice heard in Manhattan. And sidewalks are great. Again, same rules. If you don't have a permit, you can be asked by police to make sure that pedestrians can still get by, but it's a great place to speak if you have no interest in getting a permit or you don't have one. You got a ready-made audience, and you can still gather together and have the power of your voice. Finally, parks. I hope you all recognize this iconic image of Martin Luther King Jr. giving his I Have a Dream speech on the National Mall, a place that has been the site of many history-changing protests. And you can go into a park anytime and make your voice heard. You can sing, you can pray, you can chant, you can dance, you can hold up a sign of any size. But you should know that every park pretty much has a number of people that will trigger a permit requirement for a single event. So if you're organizing a protest, make sure you know what that number is. And if you're going to exceed it, understand that you're going to have fewer rights in the park if you don't have one of those permits. Now, there's an exception to that rule, and that is if you gather in response to breaking news. Here, unfortunately, we have one such protest of New Yorkers gathered in the wake of the police killing of Michael Brown. And so those were folks who didn't have a protest but had every right to be in that park. As you can see, we're still working to perfect Dr. King's dream. So let's get a little more complicated. What about other types of government property? Places that aren't really designed for protest or we think of as a public space. In these kind of spaces, the general rule is going to be that the government's going to have more ability to shut you down if they can argue that your behavior is disruptive. And of course, we want to disrupt, right, with our dissent. So ideally, we're going to be in one of these constitutionally protected places so we can do that without censorship. But let's take airports. They've become a popular place for protests lately. While airport officials can stop you from disrupting, they can't stop you from engaging in any free First Amendment activity, and of course that just makes sense. You see people with signs saying welcome home or limo for Mrs. Trump every day, right? So this young girl's just saying welcome to New York. But the rule is each of those places has a business to do. So the job of an airport, its business is travel. The farther away you are from the kind of core of that business, the more rights you're going to have. So you're not going to have a ton of rights in a departure gate, but certainly at arrivals you can do this. Or if you want to holler and shout and organize, maybe you go outside. This is JFK, a robust protest. Answering the question, who on earth goes to an airport voluntarily without a flight? Well, it turns out a hell of a lot of us. If you attack refugees, if you attack immigrants, you attack all of us. And we're going to get out in the streets. You're going to hear more about the Muslim ban from my amazing colleague Andre in a minute. But again, if you're organizing at an airport, this is the place where it is a good idea to have a liaison if you can get one, because they're not used to protests, and sometimes there's some arbitrary enforcement, which we've seen in the last month. Similarly, with the court, you can protest outside on the sidewalks, but the judges are not going to like it if you try and have a demonstration inside the hearing. And a last one that's worth mentioning is government meetings, like town halls. Same idea. They can ban disruptive behavior, shouting, yelling, talking out of turn, maybe large signs that might block someone's view, but they can't shut down speech and opinion entirely, like small buttons, small signs that don't disrupt anyone. And the last thing I want to say, and this applies to every place we've just talked about, is there's one hard and fast rule under the First Amendment that cannot be violated no matter where you stand, which is the government can't censor you just because it disagrees with your opinion. So while city council, yeah, right. So when a city council could say no massive signs, they can't say no massive signs critical of the government. And that's, again, true anywhere you can put your feet. All right, so that's kind of the high-level overview of the First Amendment. But, you know, I'm a lawyer, but I'd be the first to admit these highfalutin rights on paper don't always translate to the streets. So the question is, how can you protect yourself? If you're going out, you have every intent to obey the law. Well, the first answer is you can watch your surroundings. Being armed with your rights makes you a powerful emissary to bear witness to what's actually going down on the streets, right? Now, you don't want to interfere with an arrest or a police officer, but you have every right to yell at people, to tell them their rights, to tell them they have a right to be silent. And let's say you do everything you want to do, and it still goes awry, and you are in fact stopped by the police. Number one, anything you can, record. You have a right to photograph anything in public view if you are lawfully present. Full stop, full stop. And unfortunately, we know that a lot of law enforcement officers will lie about this right, will tell you you cannot monitor them, will tell you you can't record. That is not true. And if that happens to you, make notes and tell your friends at the ACLU. Here is an example of one of our Know Your Rights materials. I'm obviously here to give you a quick overview. So come find us at aclu.org and we'll drop some hardcore knowledge on you. This is one of our Stop by the Police Know Your Rights. The basic takeaways are you have a right to remain silent, you have a right to refuse a search, always. No matter what they say, that is true, okay? But again, don't let this dissuade you. More often than not, you're going to go out, you're going to make your voice heard, and you're going to be just fine. The Women's March, for example, the largest protest in American history, not a single arrest. That's incredible. That is our democracy working exactly as it is supposed to. So the last thing I want to say, guys, is thanks for caring. I do this for a job. But it's amazing to see so many of you here caring about your values and your principles and the American tradition enough to play your part in it and to go out and speak truth to power. And as I said, we're still working on perfecting Dr. King's dream, but it's never going to be perfected if we don't go out in the streets and we grab that moral arc of the universe and we force it towards justice. That's our job as Americans, okay? So now you know your rights. Go out and exercise them. Dissent, do it safely. Ideally, have fun while you're doing it. And if something goes wrong and you think your rights are violated, you know who to call, guys. We've got your back. Thanks for coming. Fight the power.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Louise Melling, Deputy Legal Director of the ACLU.
Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you and be part of People Power. I'm here to talk to you today about the Republicans' vision that leadership announced this week for the Affordable Health Care Act, for Planned Parenthood, and for Medicaid. So that means I'm here to talk to you about healthcare, but I can already tell you know it's about more than healthcare. That's important. But this is also, it's about discrimination. It's about dignity. It's about decency. It's about our lives. It's about the values that we hold dear, the America we want to celebrate. So let's start. Let's go with affordable healthcare. So let's refresh about what's at stake. To my mind, the Affordable Health Care Act is the most significant civil liberties and civil rights piece of legislation of this century. The Affordable Health Care Act, what it did, it has saved and changed people's lives. It's lifted 20 million people from the ranks of the uninsured. It's made it possible for people to have health, to live. It barred discrimination based on pre-existing conditions. It's barred discrimination based on gender. It gave us no-cost birth control among other services. It bars discrimination because you're a transgender person. It gave incentives to the states to expand their Medicaid rolls, making it possible for the working poor to actually have insurance. And with more Medicaid, we got more services, more people with disabilities able to access the kind of support that enables people to go to work and to live independently, to live out the civil right of not being in an institution. I see you agree it's worth fighting for. So what does the leadership, what does the bill have to say about this? Well, the bill doesn't say things specifically about what I just said. What the bill does instead is attack the very structure of the Affordable Care Act. It attacks the financing in terms of how much we give out to people who are in need, about how much we tax other people so that we can actually help other people. As I like to say, it kicks the very legs out from underneath the stool. Already, the American Medical Association, the American Association of Retired People, hospital associations around the country have come out against this bill. And why? For reasons we all care about. Because this bill jeopardizes the health insurance and the health and lives of millions of us and the people we care about. Is that what decency looks like? I think it's time we're going to step up for this one. So that's the Affordable Care Act. Let's talk about Planned Parenthood now and what this bill does. This bill says Planned Parenthood can't be part of the Medicaid program, full stop. This bill says that people who are on Medicaid, if this bill were to pass, can no longer turn to Planned Parenthood as their trusted provider for their cervical cancer screening, their mammograms, for their birth control. This bill, if it passes, will force many health centers, Planned Parenthood health centers, to close. Planned Parenthood, the facility that 1 out of 5 women in America turn to at some point in our lives for our health care. And why? Why is Planned Parenthood targeted like this? Or as I sometimes say, blacklisted like this? Because Planned Parenthood provides abortions. There you have it, from the word of the man, right? Planned Parenthood, it doesn't provide abortions through the Medicaid program. Federal Medicaid bars coverage of abortions. That's a whole other story for us. Those services are provided through other programs. But this bill, this act, this action, the vision of the leadership pushing this is that Planned Parenthood should be stripped of participation in Medicaid because it provides a constitutionally protected service. Because it provides a service that gives us, that gives women a chance to actually control our lives. Body, my choice, yes. Is that what decency looks like? Is that the America that we stand for? Are those our values? This is worth fighting for, right? So now let's go to Medicaid. What does it say about Medicaid? So today in America, what Medicaid is, it's what we call an entitlement program. The federal government promises that it will contribute money, if you are eligible for its services, to pay for the services it covers. It's going to take care of you, within boundaries. This bill would change that entirely. It would be a radical transformation of the Medicaid program. This bill says, we, federal government, we are going to cap the amount of money we will give toward any single person. We will send you, state, a certain particular set of money for a person who's eligible for Medicaid. That's all you have. What does that mean? That means fewer dollars, fewer services. Fewer dollars, fewer services for the most vulnerable of us, for the people most in need, for the most essential thing, our health, what gives us our opportunities to enjoy any other aspect of our lives. The harm will be felt most acutely, I think, by people with disabilities. What Medicaid does, and I think a lot of us don't necessarily, I didn't know this until recently, what Medicaid does is it doesn't only provide for services, cover healthcare services for people with disabilities, it provides support. It provides payment for support that enables people to go to work and to live independently, to live out that civil right, that civil liberty of being outside of an institution. Should we cut that? Is that what decency looks like? Are those the values that we're going to stand up for? I don't think so. So that's bad, right? Let's also just talk about the process for a second. So this was unveiled on Monday. By Wednesday, this was already in committee for what they call markup, amendments consideration. The Republican administration, the leadership behind this bill, wants it to come to a full House vote by the end of March. They want it on the president's desk by April, before they go home for their visits, before they have to face you in their home districts. So less than 2 months to think about a program that would deny health coverage for millions of us, for millions of the people we care about. Less than 2 months to totally radically reform a program, Medicaid, that's been in place for 60 years. I was about to say 60 decades. That would be amazing. Is that what we think is fair? So, but here's what we have. They've got some weeks where they want to get this through. We've got some weeks where we can stand up and tell them, no. So what can we do? What can you do? We already know that it matters if you talk to your members of Congress. You all saw those images of what happened in April. We saw four senators change their responses as a result of hearing from their constituents. Let's hear it for Alaska, Colorado, Ohio, and of course, because I'm on stage, yes. I've forgotten one. So we need you to call, tweet, write your members of Congress. We need you to tell them your stories of why this matters. We need you to speak the values by which you live your lives, the values that motivate you to come forward. Whether you speak matters. It matters to the members of Congress. It matters to the woman now on Medicaid who goes to Planned Parenthood for her health care. It matters to the man in a wheelchair who's able to go to work because of what Medicaid has done. It matters to the rural woman who's able to get insurance because of the subsidies about the Affordable Care Act. This is for the people, by the people. I'm asking you today to pledge that we're going to come together and stand up against these visions. And we're going to stand up against this, stand up against the ACA. We're going to stand up in the name of decency. We're going to stand up in the name of care. We're going to stand up in the name of dignity. And we're going to stand up in the name of fairness for all. Game on. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome ACLU attorney Andre Segura.
Hello, everyone. Buenos dias. Hola, Miami. Buenos dias a todos. My name is Andre Segura, and I'm one of the immigrants' rights attorneys at the ACLU in the national office. We bring litigation throughout the country to protect the rights of immigrants and the constitutional rights that we all carry when we're here. So as you heard today, Anthony and Faz both talked about, the Trump administration is launching an assault on immigrants, an assault on people of color. You know, a lot of people just thought, no, this is just campaign rhetoric. This is just what he's saying to get elected. In his first week in office, President Trump released 3 executive orders having to do with immigration. Really bad stuff. About the border, calling for a border wall, increased border patrol, about the interior, more ICE agents, and as you all know, the Muslim ban. This brought to life that campaign rhetoric, his worst rhetoric. And for many of us, that really hit home, right? We realized what was happening and it hit home. And why is that? Because we are, as a country, we're children of immigrants, we're immigrants, we're people of color, people of different faiths, we're Muslims, we're friends of Muslims, we're people with accents. That's really what makes our country great, and we're seeing it as an assault on that. And from the beginning, I have thought about my two boys. Are they going to be called in this new environment? Are they going to be called racist names because they're brown? Are they going to be told to go back to their country? I think about my parents in Houston, their beautiful Colombian, American accents. How are they going to be treated in this climate? And I'm sure many of you are worried about your friends and family in the same way, and I think that's why you've come out, that's why you're tuning in today, to learn about what we can do, right? And that's why so many people have shown up when this is happening. So I'm here to talk about three of the most pressing issues impacting immigrants and really all of us as Americans, as residents of this great country. So the first is the Muslim ban. The president promised that he was going to issue a ban on Muslim immigration, and that's exactly what he's doing. He called for a complete and total shutdown of Muslim immigration in this country. So the Friday when he released this Muslim ban, it was a week after he came into office. It was a Friday afternoon, and there was immediate chaos across the country. Right? We saw it everywhere. No one knew what was going on. The ACLU and its partners worked overnight to challenge that. We filed at 5 a.m. the next morning. And then later that night, my colleagues argued in court to put a stop to the order, to make sure that people who were trying to get in could get into this country. That day I drove to JFK in the morning, and when I got there was a small but loud protest. It was gathering, it was growing. And inside where I went to help coordinate attorneys, there were a dozen attorneys or so. Then over the next few hours, more and more attorneys came. And I remember around 6 p.m., I looked out of the window from where I was standing inside of the airport, and there was just a sea of protesters, which we can now see. And I saw on social media what was happening outside. There were protests everywhere, all around the country. And that's what became the story. The story was that people came out, regular people who were upset about what they were seeing, and said, this is not the country that I want to live in. This is not my country. I don't agree with this, and I'm going to go protest. And so we need you. We now have the second ban. President Trump rescinded that first ban after the dozens of lawsuits, admitting that it was not going to pass muster with the courts. Courts were going to reject it. He's now passed a new one, but it suffers the same problems. And that's because President Trump was very clear about his motives. He said, I want to ban Muslim immigration, and that's the same reason why this next one needs to fail. But we need you, again, to come out and voice your support. We can't do it without you. Second, President Trump has launched an attack and is trying to bully cities and states into becoming part of his immigration mass deportation force. And he's doing that by trying to take away funding from cities, by threatening them, by coercing them into engaging in immigration law. But what does that mean? So what does it mean when a local police department engages in immigration enforcement? So this means that your local police officer, when he pulls someone over, or he or she goes to a home to address a situation, isn't now just thinking about that situation, is now thinking, hey, is this person undocumented? Do I think there might be some issue with their immigration paperwork? And police leaders across the country have said, this is damaging to us. This is damaging to public safety. We need to be able to use our local resources the way we need to so that people can come out of the shadows, so that people won't fear coming to the police and being witnesses and coming out against crimes and reporting crimes. We need people to do that. All of the best law enforcement officials across the country say, this is what we need. Now, I don't know if many of you recognize this guy. This is Sheriff Arpaio. I was part of the legal team that brought him to trial for racial profiling. And we saw what he did to the Phoenix area. We saw how he terrorized the Phoenix community. They voted him out. They said, we've had enough of him. We're getting rid of that. They voted him out. And now he's facing criminal charges for violations of orders in our case. But I think, and that is significant, but I think we have to learn a lesson about Arpaio. That when local officials attempt to engage in immigration enforcement themselves, you will see racial profiling increase. You will see public safety decrease. People will go into the shadows. And we can't let that happen. Do we want more Arpaios all across the country? No. And so we need to stand up against that. We need to stand up against that. So as Faz explained to you, this is what we're pushing, what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to push more cities, to push your own city, Miami-Dade. Mayor Jimenez was one of the first ones to roll over. He was one of the first ones. We cannot let more cities roll over and give up good policies. We need to push cities to enact better policies, stronger policies, demand that they protect immigrants, demand that they protect your neighbors, and that's what we're doing through our Freedom City initiative. We need your help to do that. Lastly, raids. Immigration, deportation, raids. You've probably seen a lot about this in the news recently. This is what ICE agents look like when they come to a home, when they do a home raid, when they do a worksite raid. They're dressed in SWAT gear, bulletproof vests, helmets. It's like a military operation. President Trump has ordered 10,000 more ICE agents to be employed. That's 10,000 is twice the number that already exists. So now you're going to have 15,000, 16,000. And this is throughout the United States. This is in your city. This is in your town. This is a force that will be unaccountable, not transparent. You will not know what they're up to in your town. And we have seen, and I've brought cases against ICE for raids, because we've seen what happens when they go into communities. There's widespread constitutional violations. There's excessive force. There's guns drawn. There are children scared. So you've seen the recent reports of the raids, and you've seen what Trump is saying. Trump is saying we're going after only the most serious, only the most violent. Right? We've seen the reality. It's parents, hardworking parents. Children are scared. Dreamers are being arrested. Domestic violence victims are being arrested. People are being questioned coming off of domestic flights. This is let loose. The handcuffs are off, and we have to stop it. So what are we asking you to do? So as my colleague Lee talked about, we can do a lot to educate people about their rights. And the ACLU has great materials for you to use. My mom, she called me and she said, ¿Qué puedo hacer? Necesito hacer algo. I need to do something. I need to get out there and do something. I know of apartment complexes where people are afraid to come out, afraid to talk to people. And she wanted to bring materials, so we sent her stuff. We have this. This is one example, but we have this in a variety of different languages. This is what to do if ICE agents show up at your door. So this is talking about what an ICE agent needs to have if they want to enter without your permission. Basically, they need to have a judicial warrant, which is what we should all know. Do you have a warrant? Okay, if you don't, please leave the materials and don't open the door. Simple, right? But people don't know that everyone here has those rights. So it's important for you to get out and educate people about their rights. It's important for you to call your local leaders and say, we do not want you engaging with ICE in their raids. And then lastly, it's important for you to get out to the site of where you're hearing things happen. If you're hearing of a raid, go out, document it, witness it, film it, and listen to my colleague Lee's advice if you're going to do that. but get out there and bear witness to it, because we need that information. We need you, and we need you to step up for those who are the most vulnerable. So thank you for coming out. Thank you, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Padma Lakshmi.
Hi, everyone. I'm not an attorney, and I'm not a politician. My name is Padma, and I am an immigrant. I first came here when I was 4 years old and joined my mother, a nurse, who'd left me back in India 2 years prior. She ended an abusive marriage, and because of the stigma of divorce, arrived here in America in search of a better future for us in this land. She had exactly $100 in her pocket. She sculpted the mist in the way those who have no other choice do, willing a life into existence. And I love this country for allowing that to be possible. America has shaped our dreams, our values, and our insecurities for 3 generations, and there is no story of ours that is disconnected from the American story. But lately, I've started to feel like an outsider. Luckily, I've grown up in New York, a city of immigrants. And for many, it's a microcosm of the most idealized version of this country. My neighbors were Peruvian and Filipino, doctors and nurses, line cooks, and cab drivers. These people were the heartbeat of my beloved city. As a kid, I used to roller skate all over the streets of New York, and seeing all these faces from around the world is what kept me from feeling like I didn't belong. Through my work, thank you. Through my work on Top Chef, I've had the chance to meet people all over America. I've lived on both coasts, but I've also spent lots of time in cities like Charleston, Dallas, Chicago, New Orleans, and Miami. What makes all of these places great is the diversity of the people living in them. It makes our history richer, the art more vibrant, and it makes the food much more interesting and delicious. I am so grateful that I wound up here, that Mom worked hard, sent me to school, and that because I've worked hard too now, I can also pay it forward by mentoring other young women, by employing people in my business, and starting a health foundation. But what if my mom and I had been turned away? What makes America great is our culture of inclusion. We all are a superpower because we've managed to take the best of each immigrant culture and create our own uniquely American culture. And for all of its faults and felonies abroad and at home, our country has been, until now, admired the world over as a beacon of hope because of our tradition of welcoming people from all walks of life. We're now squandering that goodwill and reputation both globally and here at home. What happened? What happened to give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses? What happened to that American dream? Today, I am here, standing here, in defense of liberty, freedom, and true equality. My mom came here in the 70s inspired by the feminist movement. She wanted me to have a better life than she did, with equal opportunity. 40 years later, our nation is again in a state of emergency. Rights and freedoms that we've all taken for granted are now being eroded and repealed daily in Washington. I am alarmed by the hatred in our political rhetoric and by the recent rise in violence against our minority communities. But even before this, for several years, like many of you, I've been horrified by videos and reports of our young Black and Latino boys and men bludgeoned to death in the prime of their lives by the very system that we were told would protect us. So you see, our system seems really to be two systems, one for the white establishment and another for those of us unlucky enough to be born brown, gay, female, trans, or just somehow different. You know, now I'm a mother, and I want my daughter Krishna to live in a country whose policies aren't governed by fear, but by compassion. I didn't see my mother for 2 whole years as a toddler so that she could come here and make a better life for us. So I know what that pain of separation feels like. Tearing undocumented parents from their children doesn't help anyone. And giving refuge to a displaced Syrian family doesn't diminish your family's safety. Instead, it teaches all our children the very American principles of empathy and tolerance. I don't know about you, but I don't have to be Muslim or Mexican to be offended by what's happening. As Americans, we should all be offended. We shouldn't have to walk in someone else's shoes to see that those shoes must really hurt, and hurt terribly. All my life, I've tried not to feel powerless. This January at the Women's March, I protested for the very first time. I was holding my little girl's hand, she's 6, and it just felt liberating, it felt wonderful, it felt powerful, and I realized we are all powerful, and we must exercise our power now. There's a sign in the New York subway, and it says, if you see something, say something. Well, I'm saying something now to all of you, here in the audience and across the nation tuning in. Providing shelter for refugees in need is not a partisan issue. It is a human rights issue. letting folks use whatever bathroom they want, as we do for guests in our homes. It's just common decency. I mean, come on. I watch Krishna in the playground with her friend Cassius. He's African American, and she's biracial and happens to pass for white. In the years to come, Cassius's mother, Kim, and I, both single moms, will be cooking dinner at night, and we'll need to send our kids to the store for butter or milk. When they enter the same store, when that door opens, they will surely be treated differently. And that's just not right. It's not. We tell our kids to share. We tell our kids to play fair, that everyone is equal in the sandbox. Shouldn't our policies reflect this too? For all of these reasons, now is not the time to close our eyes and hope that this too shall pass without much harm. We must do more than just march. We must consistently resist discrimination of any kind. We must not tolerate the intolerance. We must use our power to say enough is enough. Because to do nothing is a crime against our nation. The time for any of us to be silent is over. We owe it to those suffragettes in Seneca Falls, those who marched for equal rights, to those who refused to sit at the back of the bus, to those beaten by billy clubs. We owe it to our fallen soldiers to preserve what they fought so hard to defend for all of us. Democracy isn't a static thing. Democracy is an ever-evolving organism, and we must not let it or ourselves devolve. Yes, we are brown, and we too are American. And yes, we are Muslim, and we are Hindus, and we are Jews. And that Sikh father shot in his own driveway, he's American too. He was American too. Oh, and over half of us are women. And we deserve equal pay. We deserve the right to choose what we want to do with our own bodies. Yes, 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 we too are the United States of America. Let's remember that first word in our country's name. United. Let's not forget who we are. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome National Political Director of the ACLU, Faz Shakir.
All right, I'm back. I'm back to recap the action plan. Do you remember that I said three things? Number one, here's the action plan. We're going to request a meeting with our local law enforcement officials. We're going to get the date, time, and location. We're going to make our cities freedom cities. When you get the date, time, and location, you go to peoplepower.org, you put it on the map so we all know what's going on, okay? That's number one. By the way, when you get this meeting, some of our sheriffs, they just need a pat on the back and to be told you're doing a great job and keep doing what you're doing. Some of them might need a little more persuasion. Number two, we want to hear ideas from you, right? Grassroots ideas. And remember, I talked about equal and opposite reaction. Let's live our values. And number three, I gave you my email address because I love you. fshakir@aclu.org, FSHAKIR at ACLU. Now, this is going to be awesome. What's coming next? Stay tuned. It's going to be great. It's going to be fun. Okay, but before I go, you know what I'm going to do, right? People power on 3. 1, 2, 3.